Fiorella Isabel, and I have Jonny Sue on the ones and twos. And today, Niko House is in the house. What's up, Niko?
What's going on, Convo Couch fam? It has been quite some time, man. Y'all been getting busy with it.
Yeah, I mean, we've been freaking busy. We've been covering as much as we can. Man, these are crazy times, Niko. These are crazy times. And I wanted to.
I'm glad none of y'all are arrested. I'm glad nobody contacted me for bail money. All right. I'm glad nobody's gotten shot in the face with a rubber bullet.
Yeah.
So far, so good.
So far, so good. Crazy times. And I wanted to have this discussion with you. Obviously, you being a black man, a progressive that's not a typical latte liberal. That's a typical, you're not, you didn't even support Bernie this round, which was controversial to a lot of people. You supported Tulsi Gabbard. So I wanted to have a conversation with somebody that follows your politics and also has an obvious opinion on racism. We've spoken about it off camera, where you've told us your interactions with the police and how that's affected you as a black man. What I've been seeing is not a lot, but a substantial amount of people that consider themselves anti-establishment on the left have been dismissing what is going on regarding police brutality as a distraction to the end goal, which is also a capitalism, the oligarchy, the establishment, etc. And I kind of wanted to get your opinion on a couple things, because it's important that your voice is heard during these times, in my opinion. So what do you think of the Black Lives Matter movement that's going on right now?
Okay, so I think it's important to mention the fact that the national level movement that is incorporated should not be conflated with local movements. It's just like if you have animals, everybody knows at this point, I'm a big fur daddy, got 6 cats, 1 dog, 7 kids total. And PETA or even what's the animal cruelty organization? I can't remember what it's called. But basically, the national level organization is trash. Like 0.02% of all their donations actually go to animals. However, the local level organizations, they really do care about these animals. Those people that work there, I had to take a dog that I rescued literally to one of these organizations, not even a month ago, a pit bull. And they were sweet. They took the dog. And even though they didn't have enough room, they still took her in. And I can go check on her whenever I want to. They take the donations, and those are used to pay employees and take care of those animals. They should not be conflated with their national level organizations. Black Lives Matter is very similar. You've seen the national level co-opt the message to a certain level. And also they've used that message to unfortunately prop up neoliberalism, and I would even say classism within the black community, because not everybody understands, or even it can be put in a position to affect Black Lives Matter if they are not an academic, if you will. Like Simone Sanders both of her parents are in academia. Simone Sanders being the former press secretary for Bernie Sanders' campaign before she stabbed him in the back, and is currently the spokesperson for Joe Biden's campaign. She came from academia. She personally has a master's, I believe, or a PhD. I think it's a master's. And so she was given access to a high level of BLM at the national level very early on. She was able to leverage that into being Bernie's national press secretary. That's not the average black person. And so the average black person, when they hear BLM, they could care less about the politics surrounding the name as much as they care about how the phrase Black Lives Matter affects them personally. Because a lot of us don't feel like our lives matter to the average person. And the unfortunate reality of the situation is because they don't. Our lives, I just covered the Yemen crisis, and we see kids, 8 and 10-year-olds being married off so that there's not an extra mouth to feed in the household. If kids' lives, little girls' lives don't matter to a lot of these people to the point where they can talk about it and care about it, then I would be surprised if they care about my life, or the lives of somebody else who might look like me, the lives of these 90% of the prison population that is black, where for the largely due to the drug war, whenever now we see literally white women being able to make millions off of marijuana. So BLM, the phrase, BLM, the local movement, BLM, the idea, should not be conflated with those who try and co-opt it. Because hell, I mean, there was just a white dude who literally created a Black Lives Matter nonprofit and made millions off of it the last couple of months. And he said, "Oh, actually, it's not affiliated with BLM at all." He said that after he collected millions, and it turned out to be a pro-cop organization.
Oh, wow.
So this is the stuff we always see people co-opt movements. That does not make those movements any more illegitimate. Remember, unfortunately, John Lewis did march with MLK, and I think that all of us would know that John Lewis is not in his best day, even close to being an MLK. Yeah. Some people just happen to find the front of the camera.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of things are going to get co-opted, but you have to be able to have nuances into the local organizations. The Black Lives Matter organization in Los Angeles has been pretty effective and really good at organizing organizing a movement that's big enough to get national attention. And they also go after Democrats. Here, they go after the Democratic Jackie Lacey, who refuses to prosecute killer cops. And she's the DA. And she's Black, and they go after her. So, I mean, I think that there's an awareness that, at least here, that it's not just about Democrats and Republicans. However, do you think there's a sort of acceptance, an excuse for a lot of people to still be bringing up Obama, because a lot of people are kind of nostalgic about Obama right now. The establishment is obviously pushing that, but even some people that consider themselves progressive are starting to be like, well, Obama wasn't that bad. When he was a warmonger, took us from 2 to 7 wars. We know what he did, how many people he bombed. And is there a justification for a Black person to feel empowered by Obama because he was the first Black president and because he did endure a lot of racist attacks when he was a president? I can almost understand, like, saying, oh, one of us got to be president, and a lot of people feel that sort of, yeah, Obama wasn't great, but I mean, he was the first Black president. How do you feel about that situation?
So Obama, he was the first quote unquote Black president. But even for me personally, when I'm discussing this topic amongst my friends, I'm always now very careful to kind of parse the definition and meaning of what a first Black president means. When we say that, I feel like we associate the first Black president with living through the struggles of the average African American in the United States, whenever Barack Obama did not come from that struggle. And this is actually a very common thing when you look at the neoliberal establishment. Joyanne Reed is I think her family's from Cameroon. Kamala, she did not live with her Jamaican father. She actually lived with her Indian mother, who used to be conservative, or at least, actually most people from that era were conservative. So her mother being Indian, probably even more so. And they lived in the richest community in Canada before Kamala herself moved back down here to go to Howard University. So you see the co-option of Black faces, if you will, that do not have the experiences of African Americans. Obama was never subject to the drug war. He lived with the white side of his family, which is why you go by Barry instead of Barack, because you want to be accepted. And so when you look at that, there's a reason that Obama was. Say that one more time. Oh, it did? Okay, give me 1 second. I'll just put on my other cam. No biggie. But there shouldn't be a conflation of what Obama did as a Black man and what we expect him to do as a Black man versus what he actually did, and then pretending like he actually did it. Like he didn't do what we expect him to do. And it shouldn't ever be mistaken as if he did. And just because he's the first Black president, quote unquote, skin tone wise, does not mean he was the first president with the Black experience in America, if that makes sense. And we shouldn't, if we give him a pass, that's just dangerous overall for Black people.
How do white people or non-Black people then approach the Obama situation? Because especially to a Black person, it can be a very touchy subject.
Bring up the Black experience. Bring up what he did for the Black experience in this country. Did he alleviate the issues that we deal with? I mean, if we look at what's been happening with the response to the protests, I would say he's exacerbated the response that policing institutions have to Black people, right? Because of the militarization of the police force, literally allowing them to use chemical weapons on us that we wouldn't be even able to use on adversaries during a war, right? Where has he been at during these protests? I would argue he was the same place he was at during Ferguson. Nowhere, right? Matter of fact, it's even worse because even at that point, we found out after that he had militarized the police. And now we're seeing him push Joe Biden, who has already said fundamentally that shit wouldn't change. But in addition to that, he's arguing for more funding for the police. In addition to that, the Democrats are basically, I think they recently passed legislation, but I don't think it'll get through the Senate. But if you actually look at the legislation and read what they're trying to do, they said they want to incentivize them for training programs for implicit racial bias training and things like that. But when you say incentivize, what they really mean is we're going to give them funding no matter what.
Yeah,
that's what it really means. Obama is at the bare minimum complicit to what we are dealing with right now in the Black community. But I would say that he's directly contributed to a lot of the problems that we have now because he aided and abetted, in my opinion, what many would consider war crimes.
Yeah,
on domestic soil.
100%. And so I've been going to a lot of these protests, and while I am seeing a few people say go vote, go register to vote, they're not saying go vote for Biden, but obviously they're not saying go vote for Trump. I am seeing a couple of young people start talking about Malcolm X, start talking about the Black Panther Party and what Fred Hampton did. What is your opinion on those organizations? Do you think they could ever come back in some form? We are seeing the reemergence of not only against police brutality, but last night we were covering a protest in Beverly Hills where they started chanting abolish capitalism. They started chanting eat the rich. That is a very big deal to me.
I like those chants.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. We're making the shift now to economic focus, and it's coming from Black people and Latino people, but it's coming from young people. And yeah. I'm hopeful seeing this slight shift. So how do we get to something like the Rainbow Coalition?
So the Black Panthers, it's going to be interesting to see if they're able to make a comeback because they've been considered a domestic terrorist organization by the FBI, which, by the way, I feel like I would be remiss to not mention the fact that where are those people at when it came to Bubba Wallace? Because y'all thought that the FBI exonerated whoever the hell hung that noose in there, right? Because they remember that was from 2019. The video says that it was from 2019 and NASCAR agrees with the video. And I was like, okay, then where the hell is the video at? Because my initial inclination was to believe Bubba Wallace because I'm like, bro, you have to know that they're going to use photos or videos during this investigation. But in my opinion, the moment that the FBI was immediately brought in, that was my clue that they were going to sweep it under the rug. Because if you can use the FBI's name, then people will give that investigation legitimacy. But the problem is, goes back to the Black Panthers, the FBI is full of white supremacists. Mm-hmm. They run cover for white supremacy. And so that is the only reason that organizations like Black Panthers literally had their house. Fred Hampton had his house raided. Mm-hmm. And his pregnant, I think it was pregnant wife was in there with him whenever he had his house raided. And they created this extremely elaborate lie as to what went down, claiming that Fred Hampton ran a shot at him after the police announced themselves, even though Fred Hampton and his wife were allegedly sleeping when it happened. But we can't get you to raid the house and arrest David Duke. We can't get you to raid the house. What's that grand man? Was it David? No, no, I think it was David Duke, right? The Grand Dragon. Yeah, David Duke, Richard Spencer, all these people. We can't even get you to arrest two white men who killed a Black dude who was in a construction home, and they claim that, he was like robbing a property. And the person on the property was like, there was nothing taken. I don't know what the hell y'all talking about. We can't even get y'all to do the bare minimum when it comes to the white supremacy terrorists in this country, but yet Fred Hampton was assassinated. So it worries me when we have the organization responsible for Fred Hampton's assassination via basically creating an informant, his right-hand man was an informant. Then you have the MLK situation where the FBI was found guilty in a court of law for killing Martin Luther King. And so when we're looking at the Black Panthers, they might have to be, quote, reimagine their brand. But I feel like there is a rainbow coalition building, and it does give me hope, right? Because me and you are natural skeptics, right? Whenever there's a national movement at this level that builds up at this pace, we're like, oh, okay, who astroturfed this thing, right? And it's because we've seen things like the Women's March, where I personally went to the Women's March in New York for the very first one. And I talked to the NYPD because I was confused as hell. In my day, when you protest, you don't have the cops show up unless they're there to shoot you, okay? Or, shoot canisters at you full of tear gas. So I asked him, what are you doing here, man? He's like, oh, man, I'm getting a little bit of extra pay. I said, excuse me, what you mean? He said, oh, we got paid to do security for this event. That's not how protests or movements work.
Right.
If you are genuinely there to make change and it is not being astroturf, you are being attacked by cops, not protected by them. And so when you're looking at what we're seeing with this protest, the moment that they decided to send the National Guard, and I think they tried to send the 82nd Airborne Corps to California and LA, 82nd from Fort Bragg. They tried to send them. You know what that means to me? They have no control over the situation. Democrats were trying to blame Russia at first, and Republicans were trying to blame Antifa. And then the Democrats said, oh, well, we don't want to defund the police. We don't want to do that. Hold up. We want to defund we don't really care what y'all, but all of a sudden the Republicans and Democrats are on the same talking point.
Yeah, exactly.
So whenever you see that happen, it's one of two things. They're trying to keep everything in control, like by controlling and shifting the narrative back into something that's usable for them, especially for the November elections. Mm-hmm. But on the other side of that coin, we always know that the only time that the Democrats and Republicans even have a similar approach to any given issue, it's because they are trying to screw the people, right? So that I think that we're beginning to see a genuine rainbow coalition. And I know for people who say, oh, well, it looks like it's mostly made up of white people. Motherfucker, I don't know if y'all noticed, most of the country is white. Can y'all believe it? Most of the country is white. When Martin Luther King was building his coalition, they had white people involved largely at the Million Man March. I would probably make an argument it was 50% or more white people there. They had white people in the Black Panthers. Some of the best allies for the Black Panthers, for the leadership of the Black Panthers were white. And not only white people that are middle class, but white celebrities. What's her name? Not Joy Behar. There was a very popular white celebrity. I want to say she's passed now, unfortunately. But she was one of the key allies when it came to Black Panthers. She hid their leadership all the time. She protected them. She spoke up for them on television. That's what we wanted. God damn it. We want people to use their privilege for the right way. If I'm a man, I try to use I am a man, but while being a man, if Fiorella's in a situation where she's being negatively impacted just by the patriarchy because she's a woman, I try to use my privilege in a way that would allow her to get a fair shake. That's what it's supposed to be. Pasta does the same thing. For me, there's situations where me, Fee, and Johnny look at Pasta, hey, Pasta, you got to handle this one. And he knows exactly what that means. And seriously.
He's got that old white man.
Got the old white man. Remember when we got pulled over in New Hampshire? Oh, yeah. And basically they looked at Pasta and were like, oh, well, if you're here, okay. Well, I guess everything's okay. You can drive home.
That totally happened, by the way.
Totally happened.
That's a real thing.
And Niko was driving. So
and I was pulled over and they made up a lie that I was speeding when everybody's in the car. Everybody's in the car, bro. And I was on cruise control. And the only reason that the situation didn't go south is because they realized eventually that everybody was in the car. And so they just got super nice out of nowhere. Yeah. And so that's what we should be seeing as a rainbow coalition. Keep talking. I'm gonna go ahead and get my camera put back in.
Yeah. So I agree. I mean, right now in Los Angeles, we have something called the Black Future Project that has come up. And it's pretty much what led this protest from last night in Beverly Hills. It's the the coalition, it's kind of like, I would say Chaz and Chop, but supposedly more organized. They're also working to give the homeless tents if they need them. And they are trying to focus on economics too, not just obvious police brutality, which is a huge issue, but economics, because Los Angeles is one of the main cities that has seen people just really be pushed out of their homes. We already had a homeless crisis in Los Angeles. Over 65,000 people homeless, and that was people that were actually homeless. That wasn't even counting people sleeping in their cars. That wasn't even counting people that that are staying with their friends. And there's also a rent strike going on. So there are all these things happening in Los Angeles, and it's going to get worse. So what I'm seeing here is the shift to focusing on economics as well as the social issues, because economics impacts Black and brown people. And the James Butler is the lead organizer of this, and we interviewed him, and he was talking about how Black and brown communities are severely impacted economically, but there are all kinds of people that are impacted, and they're willing to work with all kinds of people. So I'm really hopeful in seeing this sort of alliance right now, because I think that's going to be where you get people that are poor, working class white people to understand that this could be a bigger thing. And I think as progressives, as who we are, you and I and Pasta and Jonny, we understand that this is also about the oligarchy, money, class, imperialism, our military industrial complex, and we want to see that tied together. For me, the worry was that it needed to come from one of these, it needed to come from a Black person too. So what I like is seeing these movements happen, and I think it's possible. Now, I want to shift to the discussion.
Can I say something really quick before?
Sure.
I just want to say that, speaking to the economic part, what people have to understand is that we are, like, I understand it's a class thing. Most Black people actually understand we need class coalitions, class-based coalitions. But once again, it's like a car, people. Think of racism as the alternator, think of sexism as the battery. You can think of just gender politics and the LGBTQ community as the tires. And classism is the engine itself. You can have the best, most souped up engine in the world, and guess what? If your alternator is broken, you're not going anywhere. Your car isn't running. It might look pretty to look at. It might, oh man, look at that engine right there, man. If this thing can run, we might really get somewhere. And that's basically what people are trying to explain to you all, why we have to say Black Lives Matter, why it's important to stand up for gender equality, why it's important to stand up for the LGBTQ community. Because I've seen the way that trans people have been treated during this thing, and it's not been pretty. It's been disgusting. You can't say out of your mouth Black Lives Matter and then treat transgender people like second-class citizens. You can't do that. If you don't have a tire, you're not moving. If your gas tank is filled with sugar, you're not moving. If your alternator is broke, you're not moving. Yes, the engine is important. However, your car isn't going anywhere until you address all the problems. And that is what people have to understand. Stop trying to pretend like you can get this country on the right track without addressing racism. Stop pretending it's a distraction. I've never in my life once said, man, this alternator, I want to get it fixed, but it's distracting me from my engine. Right. No, you better go get both them shits fixed. And yeah, it might take a little bit of time, might cost a little bit more money. You might have to focus, and it might take a little bit more time to develop, but you got to get it done if you want your car to move.
Exactly, 100%. Let me read this quick super chat from None of Your Business. In order to suppress the movement, they will frame it as violent by the demonstrators to change the attitude of people on the outside of the movement. I agree. I mean, that's been the mainstream media's whole archetype, is to really frame it entirely as violent. And all I have seen is the protesters be peaceful, but more than anything, nonviolent. So even if it is uncomfortable for some people that they're stopping traffic, it is still a nonviolent form of protesting. They're not out there, burning burning people. They're not out there. The majority of these protesters that I've seen, especially the ones affiliated with Black Lives Matter, tell people do not throw things at cops, do not do this, like do not, like the looting doesn't happen from them. So we know that this is Black people have historically been framed as the violent ones, the violent, quote,
Black
thugs,
Panther Party,
the, quote,
they were claimed
predators.
to be violent.
Exactly.
They were claimed to be violent. That's how Ronald Reagan was able to pass the anti-gun laws in California, just so that Black Panthers could not defend themselves, so they wouldn't bring them on to the Capitol building. That's why the Black Panthers are considered a domestic terrorism organization. They did the same thing with the climate activists and the environmental activists in the 90s. Hell, Kim Iverson, we were just talking about before the show, she was put on a no-fly list because of a climate change paper she wrote as a kid. It took her years to get off of it because of a paper for climate and environmental justice. So like, this is what they do. And let's not forget what administration we're in right now. Granted, every administration has been pretty violent towards these type of protests, but the Trump administration has been particularly hostile towards any type of anti-authoritarian movement.
Right.
And it's not necessarily because of Trump himself. Yeah, it's partially because of his ego. But look at the people he has in charge. Right. With Gina Haspel, I can't remember. William Barr is talking. What is he trying to do now? Trying to create a task force against anti-government extremists. What the hell does that mean?
And I really want to touch with you on the subject of white fragility / also the subject of, can racism against white people exist? Because we have been, like I said, covering this on the ground, and we have seen videos of white people, one of them from Pasadena, really angry at their neighbor for having a Black Lives Matter thing on their car. We have seen them say all lives matter. We have seen discussions about the Karen thing, like Karen is a racist term. I think Karen could be a divisive term. I don't think calling people names is the most productive form, but I do not see, for me, racism is an oppressor and oppressed people thing, when the majority of the power, it's a power thing, resides in white supremacy. How can we be racist against white people? Is it possible that racism against white people exists?
No, absolutely not. You can be prejudiced against white people.
Right.
You could be discriminatory against white people, but you cannot be racist against white people. However, much to many people's surprise, a Black person can actually be racist against another Black person. Just look at Jesse Lee Peterson. Why is that? Because let's just take the term Karen, for example. No, the term Karen is not racist. That would be like calling the term cracker racist. Is it discriminatory? Is it divisive? Can it be a little offensive to somebody who is genuinely not racist? No, but let's examine where the term cracker came from. A cracker was a person who used to whip slaves. That's what they called them. And so when people say that, it is usually in response to racism that they have experienced themselves or somebody that they know have experienced. And that's why they might call a specific white person cracker. Same thing with Karen. Karen is a general term that people use to describe white, fragile women who call cops on Black people, who engage in this white feminism, which is uplift white women specifically at all costs, and make sure that you suppress and oppress anyone who could be competition for the white woman. It is the all lives matter concept. But generally for a woman, I would say that Brad would probably be the term for a white man. I know people are still mowing that over. I'm just going to go with Brad. That's what I experienced in college. So we're going to go with a Brad. But no, Karen is not a racist term. It's a response to racism. And pretending that it's a racist term is either you're exposing your own implicit racial bias, or you could be racist yourself. It's one of the two. But I think it does come back to a deeper misunderstanding of what racism actually is. People like to conflate what racism means. They conflate prejudice, but it's not surprising because I'll see AOC. Puerto Ricans are Black. No, you're not. There are Black Puerto Ricans. Everybody has a Tío Negro. Everybody. Yeah. I don't know how the hell even the damn white Spaniard Puerto Ricans have a Theo Negro. It don't really make any sense. But there are black Puerto Ricans. There are white Puerto Ricans. There are indigenous Puerto Ricans. Race should not be conflated with nationality. Race should not be conflated with ethnicity. Ethnicity generally is speaking to the cultural background. Nationality is speaking from where the region that person comes from. Race is universal. A black person who gets treated like trash in America would get treated like trash in Costa Rica, would get treated like trash in Israel, would get treated like trash in Palestine. If you are black, you are black. If you are brown, you are brown. And if you are white, no matter where you go in the world, except for Hawaii, which is a whole different thing, you will be treated. And if it's white people in Hawaii be getting it. It's actually kind of interesting to see because there's more indigenous people there than white people. So although they have their corruption there too, because the indigenous people there tend to lean a little bit conservative. Mm-hmm. So even though they're Democrats, that's a whole different thing. But the moral of the story is, if people say, well, I'm not white, I'm Jewish. David Pacman, not to call any names, but if you look in Israel, Ethiopian Jews get treated the worst. Hell, if anything, let's be honest. When we're talking about the Holocaust, who do we talk about primarily? We primarily discuss Eastern European Ashkenazi Jews. Mm-hmm. We don't talk about how Africa, Ethiopia, and a lot of the nations of Africa had their Jews massacred with silence and no one came to their defense. Mm. So racism is not the same thing as discrimination. Somebody oftentimes, if they are discriminatory or prejudiced towards a white person, it is in response to their experiences, to the racism they've went through and been through. And that's why they react viscerally like that, especially people who have had a tougher life. And they just are way less. I'm a little bit more tolerant than probably some black people would be. I'm a little bit more patient. I can afford to be. I'm not living in poverty at the moment. I mean, I've had my ass kicked by cops, but I haven't been killed by them yet, thankfully. You know what I'm saying? I've had the benefit of having a diverse friend group growing up. So I can afford to be a little bit more patient with white people as I'm trying to help them understand my perspective. People who have been systemically held down by white people for their entire lives and have had generations of people go through the same thing, they may not be as patient. And just because they respond to that in a way that you don't like doesn't make it racist.
Yes, thank you. I was waiting for that. I'm like, I need somebody to say that because it's really gets tiresome trying to make people understand with how many pictures, how many videos, stick figures, it's still, and I think then at that point it becomes not a desire to understand. You understand there's just an inherent racism there. And just to close this out, how do we go past the whole, okay, we need to combat racism but we also need to combat the wealth inequality in this country. Kim actually put out a tweet where she was criticizing the movement because it's distracting. So I'm going to read some of it and then we can talk about it. The last part of her tweet where she says, social unrest that focuses on racial tensions, the toppling of statues, and distracts from the fact that millions are currently the victims of a wealth heist continues to ensure the neoliberal elites' grip on power. What I can't understand for the life of me is how the Sanders progressives have fallen for every single one of these distractions under the guise of justice and equality. They say people like me who have no interest in rewriting history are not progressive, yet they themselves use the same talking points the elites latch onto because they know they don't threaten their power. They instead enhance it. And no, you cannot have both because you have clearly shown your focus way more on you focus way more on the energy on fighting for justice by marching in the streets, toppling statues, and risking grandma's life than you do getting money and influence out of politics. So I want to hear your take on that, but because for me it's like I understand that it is a slight distraction because we're not necessarily right away talking about the economics, but I believe in order to get to the economics part and get black people to be on your side, you can't come in there and dismiss what they're fighting for, hundreds of years of oppression. So what is your take?
Imagine being at the Million Man March and saying that Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech was actually a distraction to social and economic justice. and equality and equity. That is ridiculous. Martin Luther King and many other Black leaders have said on numerous occasions. I don't know if you have noticed this pattern, and I'm paraphrasing, but basically Black people are a warning sign, if you will. However you treat the quote unquote lowest member of your society, eventually it will trickle up to the middle class, the lower middle class, and I would even say maybe the top 10%, depending, because like the top 10% is all they're the what I like to call the most expendable class of society, because they're occupying their upper level management, middle management. They made enough money, but their money is all reliant on playing a specific game that in today's, like, especially during the COVID pandemic, a lot of them lost that game because their unemployment is not equaling to what they were making, right? So however Black people are being treated, eventually you will be treated the same way if you are poor, if you are this, if you are that. So helping, if you cannot empathize with what Black people are going through, if you cannot sympathize with what Black people are going through, then you will be incapable when the time comes to empathize with the next person who's below you. The only time that you will begin to pay attention is when you are the one finally affected by it. And it's like Kim said, oh, well, we need to focus on election integrity, which I agree with. We need to focus on this, and this is a distraction. No. This is part of it. Why do you think we have these? Why is it that we have these movements? Why? Because people are cheating to get into office, then because they're taking money from police unions, also campaign finance, election integrity. Why are they taking money from police unions? Because the police unions want to fill up prisons because they get more money for that. Okay, so now you're looking at criminal justice reform. And who is the one who primarily occupies the prisons? Black people. Okay, so now you're going back to racism. Why can we do that? Because of how we condition society to look on Black people. So now they have an excuse to ignore them because we've either romanticized them so we can use them for our pop culture, or we've demonized them. So there are certain sector of Black people where you can say, well, that Black person was successful, right? And they're successful while being Black, so everything is okay. Or you demonize them and say, oh, but this is the bad kind of Black person, right? So everything is interconnected. And I would say to you that you are using election integrity to distract from Black issues. You are using these statues. Why is the focus on statues more than police corruption? Why is the focus on statues more than a lot that have been lost? Fuck the statues. Why are so many peaceful protesters getting arrested, and why isn't that a bigger deal to you? And that's not just for Kim. That's for a lot of people who are, well, they have to premise everything with, well, I don't approve of looting. Okay, I don't care. It's that the looting is unimportant when peaceful protesters are being arrested and most often having their due process ripped from under them. Either way, oh God, California, oh Jesus, if I ever got arrested in California, y'all might not ever see me again as much as bail costs out there. So the moment you get arrested, you are broke. You have to pay for your bail. You're gonna have to pay for an attorney. You're gonna either that, or you're gonna get a public defender where they're gonna cut a deal, which requires you to pay a fine anyway. And why is that not a bigger deal? Why is that not something being primarily discussed? You want to complain about the 1% of looters. You want to defend some racist ass statues. I don't even care. Tear all the statues. I don't care about these people. We need to stop idolizing public figures for being for fulfilling the bare minimum of what it's considered to be a human. To have humanity for others. Like, yeah, was it cool that Lincoln freed the slaves? Yeah, but why am I going to celebrate you for making a declaration as simple as, hey, y'all, maybe we shouldn't have other people as slaves because they're Black? Oh my God, you're so amazing. That's the white savior complex in a nutshell. And that's what you are uplifting. Because I know Kim and how she feels about Bernie Sanders as a white savior, because we've discussed it. We've discussed it too. And me and a lot of my friends have discussed, and it's not, Bernie Sanders is cool, but he should not be elevated to the point of, once again, being deified because he wants the bare minimum for people. That should be celebrated because it should be like the issue should be celebrated when people fight for them, but not the person. Right. We should not be like for believing in basic dignity for humanity. Like, okay, cool. And if you want to remember their history, which by the way, I firmly believe that statues are put up for two reasons. No, really one reason: to lie about history. Yeah. And it's usually for one of two reasons. It's because they massacred somebody, right? Or there's the other case, right? Because people will say, well, what about MLK? You want to take down those statues too? Yeah, because first of all, MLK wouldn't want statues in his name. Two, they use the Martin Luther King boulevards. They use the MLK statues because they co-opted and watered down his message. Yep. Because they don't want you to know he called out Western imperialism. They don't want you to know that the FBI itself was found guilty of murdering him. They don't want you to know that which president was it that got caught spying on him? It wasn't Lyndon B. Johnson or Nixon, or JFK. It was one before. Eisenhower. Eisenhower got caught spying on Martin Luther King. And Martin Luther King confronted him. So that's why. The same reason that our government elevates JFK's memory, but only the part that is really vague the way they do it. It's like JFK was one of the best presidents, but when you go into details as to why he was one of the best presidents, it's because of the evolution he experienced and the fact that he called the deep state.
Yeah.
That's why. But they hide that part. So when they're elevating the brand of somebody, it's just like pop culture today. You don't know the ugly, dark parts of many of our pop culture figures because they're not real. They're manufactured by these brain trusts that are dedicated to creating a cookie cutter image so that you're more palatable for the general population, which is why most of these songs are quite literally written for third graders to be able to understand it at a third grade level. This is a fact. It's the same thing when it comes to politics. It's a pop culture fetishization of what people think and what they would like for these people to have represented, not understanding that they were assassinated for a reason is the reason we use the word assassinated. So if you have a statue, it's only going to be there for two reasons. Either you're lying about history or you're lying about history. But sometimes you water down the positive stuff or you exaggerate how good a leader actually was.
And not to mention, Niko, that everything we've been taught has been taught by the Western perspective, by the white American Western perspective. So even the things that we have been educated on haven't had, like you said, the full reality of it. We need to read more books from Black Americans, from the Black experience, because I have no idea, because I wasn't taught that, and neither were a lot of people.
We learn who invented the assembly line. We learn who invented the assembly line. Henry Ford. Everybody learns that. Nobody knows the fact that the Black man was the one who invented the automobile, at least in the United States. Nobody knows that, and that's utterly despicable. We have no idea that the person that the Rhodes Scholarship is named after is Cecil Rhodes, who was responsible for the apartheid of Africa because he believed in British Anglo supremacy. That was a test run. That's what South Africa was. That's why everybody there speaks with a British accent, because it was a test run. And we give out a scholarship every year. It's called the Rhodes Scholarship, where it's something to be celebrated.
Yep. That's
because his history is a lie. And so we need to stop glorifying, white, quote unquote, fake white saviors, and stop pretending that that's the thing, right? The standard of what's considered something to be celebrated is completely and totally decreased when you are a white male. Like basic decency is celebrated, but when a Black man overachieves, when they do let's be honest, Fred Hampton was known as a brilliant organizer, a brilliant speaker, and Fred Hampton obviously is not elevated because he used those talents to speak out against the establishment. Right. Even JFK, he was an amazing person by our standards with the evolution he experienced. But at the same time, Martin Luther King never had to go through that evolution, and he was just as keen to what imperialism meant, to what capitalism meant. And he didn't have to have the entire intelligence community organize against him to figure it out. So that's what I mean. Tulsi Gabbard, being a woman of color, was better than Bernie on a lot of the issues, the same issue that people cared about 2 years ago, but before they realized Bernie's going to drop the ball again on those issues. So instead of celebrating her for being good on those issues, when we're talking about Julian Assange, Chelsea Manning, the intelligence community, election integrity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, it was, no, you can't celebrate her for that, because then I would diminish Bernie's image. And that's who we need. So we'll see this happen again and again and again. And until we just really deal with the fact that we have a white savior complex issue in this country, which is, by the way, the same complex we use to go and conquer other nations, then we'll never really be able to get past it. But I disagree that this movement is a distraction. If it was a distraction, then why are they sending the National Guard and their entire police forces after us?
Thank you, Niko, for this conversation. I really appreciate it. I think we needed to have it. I think we could talk about this for hours, but we have a protest to go to, unfortunately. But any last thoughts on how we, just to close it out? How do we connect this movement against police brutality to the bigger movement, perhaps the general strike, perhaps the yellow vest movement, something like that, and where people can find you, which they should know.
So, I don't like, I don't want to call it a yellow vest movement, even though we need something similar. The only reason why is because America, we just are really, really, really unoriginal. We need to stop trying to look to other people for our problem to solve our problems. We have people coming up with good ideas right now. If people would listen to the people in these movements. And so what we have to do, if as the left, as populists, and even some conservatives, which by the way, I've seen some conservatives actually be pretty good on this issue, surprisingly enough. But what we have to do is, first of all, get on the same page. What are we focused on? If you're focused on the statues, then you're part of the problem. If you're focused on the looting, then you're part of the problem. You know what I'm focused on? I'm focused on the fact that police seem to be more obsessed with arresting peaceful protesters than arresting looters, right? Graham Elwood gave a brilliant, he explained to me that in his neighborhood, a convenience store was robbed during the protest, and the media got there to cover it before any police ever showed up. 30, 45 minutes. The media was there with no police. Why? Because they're more worried about arresting peaceful protesters. That's something. So we have to kind of get on the same page first. From that movement, once we start acknowledging the things that the most marginalized people in this country are going through, we could begin to build on it and then move on to economic strife. But until we deal with the fact that I might not be able to get any money or spend the money I get because I might get shot by a damn police officer, I don't care about the money as much as I do about my life. The economic strife doesn't mean much to many people if they can't even drive their vehicles without being worried about being pulled over and what that interaction can be led to. So first, let's get on the same page. Yeah, you can focus. You want to deal with the focus on the looting shit. Okay. And I mean, it's bad, but it's not as bad as losing lives. You want to focus on the statues. I guess defacing property is bad, but like, I don't really care because the statue shouldn't have been there to begin with. That's how I feel. That's basically how I've always felt about statues. If I read them to then look up what their real history is. That's why I read statues. And that's what I have read for like the last 5 years. So let's focus, get on the same page, focus on what needs to be focused on, which is life and loss of that life. Then we can worry about economic strife. But if you can't even understand the basic loss of life and empathize and internalize that and understand why people are lashing out and suffering, then I don't know why you're talking about you want to deal with economic issues, because your ass won't be able to, you're not going to care about that when the time comes either, once again, until it affects your bank account or until it is your life that is being affected.
Thank you, Niko, very much. Thank you guys for watching. And thank you, Carrie Mark, for the super chat. We appreciate you. Make sure to check us out on ROKFIN, you guys. Cryptocurrency platform. Niko's there. I'm there. Pasta's there. Johnny's there. We have Jimmy Dore there. Graham Elwood. Ron Placone. Please check it out. Also donate to our Patreon. We love you guys. Convo out. Bye.